A frantic call pierces the chaos of an airport. "Your daughter's in the hospital, come now." What twisted secret turned a simple babysitting day into a nightmare of broken bones and betrayal? Sarah's trust in her own mother and sister shatters when Harper's small, trembling voice whispers the unthinkable. Dive into this gut-wrenching family drama on Outlaw Alley. Subscribe now and help us hit 1,000 subscribers to keep these gripping stories alive. The airport buzzed with the hum of hurried footsteps and distant announcements, but Sarah Bennett barely noticed. Her carry-on bag rested at her feet, her boarding pass crumpled in one hand as she scrolled through last-minute emails on her phone. She was 35, a sharp-edged investigative journalist with a reputation for uncovering truths others wanted buried. Today she was headed to New York for the biggest interview of her career, a sit-down with a senator caught in a web of lies. Her mind raced with questions she'd spent weeks crafting, each one a dagger aimed at the heart of his story. Her phone vibrated against her palm, shattering her focus. She glanced at the screen. An unknown Atlanta number. Frowning, she swiped to answer. "Hello, Ms. Bennett?" The voice was clipped, professional, edged with something urgent. "This is Nurse Carter from Grady Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about your daughter, Harper." Sarah's breath caught, her free hand tightening around the strap of her bag. "Harper? What's wrong? Is she okay?" "She's been in an accident. She's stable now, but she's in critical condition. You need to get here as soon as possible." The words hit like a punch, knocking the air from her lungs. "An accident? What kind of accident? What happened?" Her voice rose, drawing stares from the travelers around her, but she didn't care. "I don't have all the details yet," the nurse said, her tone softening slightly. "She was brought in about an hour ago. She's unconscious and we're running tests. Can you come now?" Sarah's mind spun, a kaleidoscope of fear and confusion. "An hour ago? I left her with my mom this morning. She was fine. What do you mean critical?" Her knees wobbled, and she sank onto a nearby bench, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "I'm sorry, Ms. Bennett. That's all I know right now. Please just get here." The call ended with a soft click, leaving Sarah staring at the blank screen. Harper. Her Harper, 9 years old, with those wide hazel eyes and a laugh that could melt the hardest days away, was lying in a hospital bed. Unconscious, critical. The words echoed, sharp and merciless, slicing through the haze of her shock. She stumbled to her feet, abandoning her flight. New York could wait. The senator could wait. Nothing mattered but Harper. Her hands shook as she dialed her assistant to cancel the trip, her voice breaking as she explained. Then she booked the next flight back to Atlanta, her fingers fumbling over the screen. The wait was torture. 45 minutes until boarding, an hour in the air, a lifetime of not knowing. As she sat in the terminal staring at the gate without seeing it, her mind rewound to that morning. Harper had clung to her at the front door, her small arms tight around Sarah's waist. "Do you have to go, Mommy?" she'd asked, her voice muffled against Sarah's coat. Sarah had knelt, brushing a strand of dark hair from her daughter's face. "It's just a couple days, sweetie. You'll have fun with Grandma Diane and Aunt Kelly. They'll take good care of you." She'd smiled, kissing Harper's forehead, ignoring the flicker of unease in her gut. Diane had been distant lately, her comments laced with a bitterness Sarah couldn't quite place. Kelly, too, always comparing their lives, her tone sharp with envy. But they were family. They'd raised Sarah, after all. How could she not trust them? Now, that trust felt like a betrayal of her own making. What had happened in those few hours? Harper had been fine, drawing pictures at the kitchen table, waving goodbye with that shy smile of hers. Had she fallen? Had something hit her? The nurse hadn't said, and the silence was a void Sarah's imagination filled with horrors. The boarding call crackled over the speakers, and Sarah surged forward, her bag slung over her shoulder. On the plane, she stared out the window at the clouds, her chest tight with guilt. She should have listened to Harper's hesitation, that quiet, "I don't like staying with Grandma," she'd brushed off as childish whining. She should have seen the signs. Diane's clipped remarks about Sarah's fancy job, Kelly's snide jabs about how Harper was too spoiled, but she'd been too busy, too distracted, too sure that family meant safety. The flight landed with a jolt, and Sarah was the first off, weaving through the crowd to the taxi stand. The ride to Grady Memorial was a blur of red lights and honking horns, her nails digging into her palms. When the hospital loomed into view, gray and sprawling under the late afternoon sun, she bolted from the cab, barely pausing to pay. Inside, the antiseptic smell hit her like a wave, mingling with the low hum of voices and beeping machines. She rushed to the front desk, her words tumbling out. "Harper Bennett, I'm her mother, where is she?" The receptionist pointed her to the ICU, and Sarah half ran down the sterile halls, her heart pounding in her ears. She rounded a corner and stopped dead. There, through a glass window, was Harper, tiny and pale on a white bed, tubes snaking from her arms, a bandage wrapped around her head. Her dark hair fanned out on the pillow, and her chest rose and fell in shallow, fragile breaths. Sarah pressed a hand to the glass, her knees buckling. "Oh, God, baby," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "What did they do to you?" A doctor approached, his face grim but kind. "Miss Bennett, I'm Dr. Ellis. Harper's stable, but she's got a concussion and a broken arm. We're waiting for her to wake up to know more." Sarah nodded, barely hearing him, her eyes locked on her daughter. Stable, not safe, not okay, just alive. For now. She turned to the doctor, her voice a raw edge. "Who brought her in? Where's my mom?" "They're in the waiting room," he said, glancing down the hall. "They said it was an accident. She fell." Fell. The word hung there, simple and hollow, but something in the doctor's tone, hesitant, uncertain, sent a shiver through her. Sarah straightened, wiping her face. She'd get answers. She'd find the truth. Because whatever had happened to Harper, it wasn't just an accident. Not with Diane and Kelly involved. She took a step toward the waiting room, her fear hardening into something fierce. Whatever they'd done, she'd make them pay. 2 days earlier, the Atlanta sun spilled through the kitchen window, casting golden patches across the table where Harper sat, her tongue poking out in concentration. She was hunched over a notebook, her pencil scratching out a story about a brave girl who saved her village from a dragon. Sarah leaned against the counter, sipping coffee, watching her daughter with a quiet ache of pride. At 9, Harper had her mother's sharp mind and her father's gentle heart, a combination that made her both fearless and fragile in ways Sarah couldn't always protect. "Mummy, listen to this," Harper said, looking up with those big hazel eyes. "The girl climbed the mountain all by herself, even though everyone said she'd fall. Does that sound good?" Sarah smiled, setting her mug down. "It sounds perfect, sweetie. You're braver than that girl, you know. Riding's its own kind of mountain." Harper beamed, her cheeks dimpling, and went back to her scribbling. Moments like these were what Sarah lived for, small, ordinary threads that wove their life together since the divorce. James had been gone for 2 years, chasing oil rigs in Alaska, leaving Sarah to raise Harper alone. They talked on video calls, his grainy face lighting up Harper's screen every Sunday, but it wasn't the same. Still, Sarah made it work. Her job at the Atlanta Chronicle kept the bills paid and her name in print, even if it meant late nights and missed school plays. The phone buzzed on the counter, a sharp reminder of the world beyond their little bubble. Sarah glanced at it, an email from her editor. The subject line read, "Urgent, NY interview confirmed." She sighed, rubbing her temple. The senator's story had been her obsession for months, and now it was real. 3 days in New York starting tomorrow. She'd known it was coming, but the timing still felt like a gut punch. "Harper," she said, her voice softer than she meant it to be. "Mommy's got to go on a work trip tomorrow. Just a couple days. You'll stay with Grandma Diane and Aunt Kelly, okay?" Harper's pencil froze mid-word. She looked up, her smile fading. "Do I have to? I don't like staying with Grandma. She yells a lot, and Aunt Kelly makes me do stuff I don't want to." Sarah crossed the room, kneeling beside her daughter's chair. "Oh, sweetie, they're just strict sometimes. Grandma raised me, you know. She's tough, but she loves you, and Kelly's got Ethan to keep you company. It'll be fun." Harper didn't look convinced. She twisted a strand of hair around her finger, a nervous habit Sarah knew too well. Last time, Grandma said I talk too much like you, and Aunt Kelly told Ethan I'm spoiled because I've got a big room." Sarah's chest tightened. She'd heard the barbs before. Diane's muttered complaints about how Sarah thought she was better than us with her city job. Callie snide remarks about Harper's nice clothes. It stung, but they were family. Diane had been a single mom too, scraping by to raise Sarah and Kelly after their dad walked out. Callie, now 32, was stuck in the same cycle, divorced, broke, raising Ethan in Diane's cramped house. Sarah had escaped that life, and sometimes she wondered if they resented her for it. "They don't mean it, Harp," she said, brushing her daughter's cheek. "They're just having a hard time. You'll be fine." "I'll call every night, promise." Harper nodded, but her eyes stayed downcast. Sarah stood, swallowing the guilt that crept up her throat. She didn't have a choice. Her neighbor was out of town, James was thousands of miles away, and daycare wouldn't cover 3 full days. Diane and Kelly were her only option. That afternoon, she drove Harper across town to Diane's squat brick house on the edge of Atlanta. The yard was overgrown, the porch sagging under years of neglect. Diane met them at the door, her gray hair pulled tight in a bun, her mouth set in a thin line. Kelly lounged on the couch inside, her blonde hair messy. Ethan sprawled beside her playing a handheld game. "Hey, Mom," Sarah said, forcing a smile as she set Harper's backpack down. "Thanks for watching her. It's just till Wednesday." Dylan grunted, eyeing Sarah's pressed blouse and heels. "Always running off, aren't you? Work, work, work. Guess that's why you're too busy for us." Sarah bit her lip. "It's a big story. I'll make it up to you." "Sure you will," Kelly chimed in, not looking up from her phone. "Harper's gonna love it here. Maybe we'll teach her how real people live, not all fancy like you." Harper shrank closer to Sarah, clutching her notebook. Sarah squeezed her hand, whispering, "You'll be okay. Call me if you need anything." She knelt for a long hug, breathing in the strawberry scent of Harper's shampoo, then stood to face her mother. "Mom, please. She's a good kid. Just take care of her." Diane's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something dark passing through them. "I raised you, didn't I? I know how to handle a child." Sarah nodded, uneasy but out of time. She kissed Harper goodbye, waved to Ethan, who barely glanced up, and headed for her car. As she pulled away, she caught Diane's reflection in the rearview mirror, standing on the porch with her arms crossed, watching her go. Beside her, Kelly leaned in, muttering something Sarah couldn't hear. The words didn't matter. The tone did. Low, sharp, like a blade being honed. Back home, Sarah packed her suitcase, her mind half on the trip, half on Harper. She dialed James that night, his voice crackling through the line from a windy rig site. "She's with your mom and sister?" he asked, sounding skeptical. "You sure that's a good idea?" "They're family," Sarah said, more to convince herself than him. "Harper'll be fine. It's only 2 days." James hesitated. "Yeah, just keep an eye on her, okay? I've got a bad feeling." Sarah laughed it off, but the unease lingered as she hung up. She climbed into bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Harper's quiet plea. By morning, she was at the airport, her daughter's face fading behind the rush of deadlines and plane tickets. She didn't know it then, but those 2 days would unravel everything she thought she understood about family. Sarah stood frozen outside Harper's hospital room, her hand still pressed against the glass, tears drying into tight streaks on her cheeks. The sight of her daughter, small, broken, tethered to machines, burned into her mind, a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Dr. Ellis's words echoed in her ears. She fell. Simple. Too simple. Harper didn't just fall. Not her careful, quiet girl who clung to railings and checked her steps twice. Something was wrong, and Sarah could feel it clawing at her gut. She turned from the window, her legs unsteady, but her resolve hardening. The waiting room was down the hall, a sterile square of flickering lights and stiff chairs where Diane and Kelly sat. She needed answers now. Her heels clicked against the tile as she marched toward them, each step fueling the storm building inside her. They were there when she rounded the corner. Diane perched on the edge of a seat, her hands clasped tight. Kelly slouched beside her, scrolling her phone like nothing had happened. The casualness of it hit Sarah like a slap. She stopped a few feet away, her voice low but trembling with fury. "What happened to my daughter?" Diane looked up, her face a mask of practiced concern. "Oh, Sarah, thank God you're here. It was awful. She fell down the stairs. Just a terrible accident." Kelly nodded, not lifting her eyes from the screen. "Yeah, she was running around. You know how kids are." Tripped over her own feet. Sarah's hands curled into fists. "Running around? Harper doesn't run on stairs. She's afraid of heights. You know that." Her gaze darted between them, searching for cracks in their story. "Tell me exactly what happened, right now." Diane sighed, a heavy, theatrical sound. "We were busy in the kitchen, fixing lunch. She must have gone upstairs to get something. Next thing we knew, we heard a crash. Found her at the bottom, poor thing." Kelly chimed in, finally pocketing her phone. "Yeah, she was out cold. We called 911 right away. What else could we do?" Sarah's eyes narrowed. Their words didn't fit. Too smooth, too rehearsed. Harper wasn't clumsy. "And right away?" The nurse had said Harper was brought in an hour ago, but Sarah had left her with them at 8 that morning. It was nearly noon now. 4 hours. 4 hours for a crash loud enough to hear from the kitchen to turn into a hospital bed. "That's it?" Sarah snapped. "She fell and you called? What was she doing upstairs? Why wasn't anyone with her?" Diane bristled, sitting straighter. "Don't you start with me, Sarah. We were watching her fine. Kids fall, it happens. You weren't here, so don't act like you know." The accusation stung, but Sarah pushed past it. "I wasn't here because I trusted you, and now she's got a broken arm and a concussion, so forgive me if I don't buy your accident story." Kelly smirked, crossing her arms. "Oh, here we go. Perfect Sarah, always judging us. Maybe if you didn't spoil her rotten, she'd listen better." Before Sarah could fire back, a small figure shuffled into the room. Ethan, Kelly's 11-year-old son, his dark hair messy, his eyes red-rimmed. He hovered near the doorway, clutching a soda can, looking like he wanted to disappear. Sarah softened her tone, stepping toward him. "Ethan, honey, were you there? Did you see what happened?" He flinched, glancing at his mom, then down at the floor. I don't know. It was fast." Kelly stood, her voice sharp. "Leave him out of this, Sarah. He's upset enough." But Sarah crouched to his level, ignoring Kelly's glare. "Ethan, please. I need to know. Harper's hurt, and I have to help her. You're not in trouble, I promise." Ethan's lip trembled, and he shifted his weight, the soda can creaking in his grip. "She wasn't running," he mumbled, so quiet Sarah almost missed it. "Grandma told her to carry the box." Sarah's heart stuttered. "What box?" Diane cut in, her voice rising. "Ethan, hush. You don't know what you're talking about." "But," Ethan kept going, tears spilling now. "The big one with the old dishes, from the attic. It was heavy and Harper said she couldn't, but Grandma yelled at her to do it anyway. Aunt Kelly said she had to learn to work like us. Then she fell and they argued about calling the ambulance. I told them to stop, but they wouldn't listen." The room went silent, the weight of his words crashing down like a stone. Sarah straightened, her breath shallow, her eyes locking on to Diane and Kelly. "You made her carry a box down those stairs, a 9-year-old? Are you insane?" Diane's face flushed, but she held her ground. She needed to pitch in. "You've got her so soft she can't lift a finger. It wasn't that heavy." "Not that heavy." Sarah's voice broke, raw and ragged. "She's in there with tubes in her arms because of you. And you argued about calling for help? How long did you wait?" Kelly stepped forward, defiant. We didn't wake, we just We thought she'd wake up. It wasn't our fault she's weak." Sarah lunged, stopped only by the last thread of her self-control. "Weak? She's a child, my child, and you nearly killed her." A nurse appeared, drawn by the shouting, but Sarah barely noticed. She turned back to the hall, her legs carrying her to Harper's room before she could say more. The door swung open, and she sank into the chair beside the bed, taking Harper's small, cold hand. Her daughter stirred, her eyelids fluttering, a faint whimper escaping her lips. "Mommy?" Harper's voice was a thread barely there. "I'm here, baby," Sarah whispered, tears flooding back. "I'm so sorry. I'm here now." Harper's eyes opened, dazed and glassy. "I didn't want to carry it. It was too big. Grandma said I had to, or I was bad. Then I fell." Sarah's chest cracked open, rage and grief spilling out. She kissed Harper's forehead, her lips trembling against the bandage. "You're not bad. You're perfect. They were wrong, not you." Harper's hand tightened in hers, then slackened as she drifted back to sleep. Sarah sat there, staring at her daughter's bruised face, the truth sinking in like poison. Diane and Kelly hadn't just failed Harper. They'd hurt her, deliberately, out of some twisted spite. And they'd almost gotten away with it. She pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking as she dialed James. He picked up on the second ring, his voice rough with wind and worry. "Sarah? What's going on?" "They did it," she said, her voice breaking. "They hurt her, James. Our little girl, you need to come home, now." Sarah sat by Harper's bedside, her daughter's hand limp in hers, the hospital room a cocoon of beeping monitors and muted light. James's voice crackled through the phone, strained against the howl of Alaskan wind. "I'm on the next flight out," he said, his words clipped with panic. "I'll be there by morning. How's she doing?" "She's awake, but barely," Sarah whispered, eyes tracing the bruises blooming on Harper's arm. "She's scared, James. She told me they made her carry a box, too heavy for her. She fell because of them." A long pause stretched over the line, then a low, furious exhale. "Diane and Kelly, your mom and sister did this." "Yes," Sarah said, her voice hardening. "And they waited before calling for help. Ethan saw it all. We can't let this go." "We won't," James said, his tone steel. "I'm coming. We'll fix this together." The call ended and Sarah leaned her forehead against Harper's hand, the weight of the day pressing down. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, just sat there, replaying Ethan's confession, Harper's broken whisper. Her own mother and sister. Family, the word tasted bitter now, twisted into something unrecognizable. But she wouldn't break. Not yet. Harper needed her strong. By dawn, James burst through the hospital doors, his coat dusted with snow, his face etched with exhaustion and rage. He was taller than Sarah remembered, broader too, but his eyes, Harper's eyes, were the same, soft until they weren't. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Sarah into a rough hug, his breath hot against her hair. "I should have been here," he muttered. "I should have come back sooner." Sarah pulled away, shaking her head. "We both trusted them. That's over now. She's what matters." James nodded, his jaw tight, and turned to Harper. She was awake, her eyes flickering open at the sound of his voice. "Daddy?" she croaked, reaching with her good arm. He knelt beside her, his big hand swallowing hers. "Hey, kiddo. I'm here. You're gonna be okay." Harper's lip trembled, but she managed a tiny smile. "I missed you." "Miss you more," he said, his voice cracking. He looked at Sarah, his eyes blazing. "What's the plan?" Sarah straightened, her journalist instincts kicking in. "We get the truth out, all of it. I've already called the police. They're sending someone this morning. Ethan's our witness, and Harper can tell them what she remembers. We need a lawyer, too, someone good." James nodded. I've got savings, we'll hire the best. The police arrived an hour later. 2 officers, one with a notepad, the other with a recorder. Sarah recounted everything. Harper's injuries, Ethan's story, the delay in calling for help. James filled in his side, his absence, his trust in Sarah's family. Harper, propped up on pillows, spoke in a small, halting voice. Grandma said I had to carry the box. It was heavy and I said no, but she yelled. Aunt Kelly laughed, then I fell and it hurt so bad. The officers exchanged a glance, their faces grim. We'll need to talk to the boy, one said, and inspect the house. Sarah led them to Ethan, who sat in the waiting room, alone now. Diane and Kelly had left after their argument, claiming they needed rest. Ethan repeated his story, his voice shaking but steady. They were mad at her all day, said she was lazy like Aunt Sarah. I tried to help her with the box, but they told me to stop. The investigation moved fast after that. By afternoon, police searched Diane's house, finding the narrow, rickety staircase. No handrail, just worn wood and peeling paint. The box lay at the bottom, cracked open, spilling chipped dishes across the floor. Fingerprints on the cardboard matched Harper's small hands, too high up for her to have held comfortably. A neighbor came forward, a gray-hailed woman with sharp eyes, saying she'd heard shouting and a child crying for nearly an hour before the ambulance arrived. Sarah and James hired a lawyer that night, a woman named Clara Hayes, known for taking down neglectful guardians. She met them at the hospital, her briefcase stuffed with files, her voice calm but fierce. This isn't just an accident, she said. It's neglect, maybe endangerment. We've got enough to press charges. The delay in calling 911 alone could seal it. The next week blurred into depositions and hospital visits. Harper stabilized, her arm in a cast, her head still tender, but her spirit flickered back. Small smiles, quiet stories whispered to James. Sarah barely left her side, while James handled calls with Clara. Diane and Kelly fought back, hiring a cheap attorney who claimed Harper was unruly and the fall was her fault. Sarah nearly lost it when she heard, but Clara kept her focused. They're grasping, she said. We've got Ethan and the evidence. They don't stand a chance. The hearing came 10 days later, a cramped courtroom thick with tension. Sarah sat beside James, her hand gripping his, Harper's absence a hollow ache. She was still too fragile to attend. Ethan took the stand, his voice small but clear, recounting the yelling, the box, the wait. The neighbor testified next, her words cutting. I heard that little girl crying and those women arguing about whether she was faking it. I almost called myself. Diane and Kelly sat across the room, Diane stone-faced, Kelly fidgeting. Their lawyers stumbled through a defense. Harper was disobedient. The stairs were old. They'd panicked. But the judge wasn't swayed. The evidence piled up, the unsafe house, the delay, the spite in their actions. When Clara played a recording of Harper's statement, her tiny voice echoing through the room, Grandma said I was bad. Sarah saw Diane flinch. The ruling came swift and sharp. Diane and Kelly were guilty of child endangerment and neglect, sentenced to 2 years each, with probation after. The gavel fell, and Sarah let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. James squeezed her hand, his eyes wet but steady. Outside the courthouse, they stood in the crisp Atlanta air, the weight of it all settling in. It's over, Sarah said, her voice raw. They can't hurt her anymore. James pulled her close, his arms solid around her shoulders. It's not over. We've got work to do. Us, Harper, a real family. I'm not going anywhere this time. Sarah nodded, tears slipping free. For the first time in days, she felt something like hope. They'd won justice, but the real fight, the one to heal, was just beginning. The late afternoon sun dipped low over the Georgia hills, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Sarah stood on the porch of their new home, a modest 2-story house on the outskirts of Atlanta, its white siding fresh and its yard dotted with wildflowers Harper had insisted on planting. She leaned against the railing, a mug of tea warm in her hands, listening to the soft hum of cicadas and the distant laughter drifting from inside. A year had passed since the courtroom, since the gavel fell, since everything broke and began to mend. The front door creaked open, and Harper stepped out, her dark hair pulled into a loose braid, her left arm free of its cast but still held a little stiffly. She was 10 now, taller, her hazel eyes brighter despite the shadows that sometimes lingered in them. In her hands she clutched her notebook, the one she'd started filling again after months of leaving it blank. "Mommy, I finished my story," she said, her voice carrying that quiet strength Sarah had come to cherish. "Can I read it to you?" Sarah smiled, setting her mug on the railing. "I'd love that, sweetie. Let's sit." They settled onto the porch swing, the chains creaking softly as they rocked. Harper opened her notebook, her fingers tracing the page. "It's about a girl who got lost in a big, scary forest," she began. She was scared at first because the trees were tall and the shadows moved funny, but then she found a light, a little lantern someone left for her, and it led her home. Sarah listened, her heart swelling. Harper's words were simple, but they carried a weight beyond her years. The forest, the fear, the light. It was her story, their story, woven into something new. When Harper finished, she looked up, her eyes searching Sarah's face. "That's beautiful, Harp," Sarah said, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Who left the lantern?" Harper grinned, a rare, full smile. "Her mom and dad. They came back for her." Before Sarah could reply, James stepped onto the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd been in the garage tinkering with an old bike he'd promised to fix for Harper. His flannel shirt was streaked with grease, his hair mussed, but his face softened when he saw them. "What's this, story time without me?" Harper giggled, hopping up to hug him. "I saved it for you too, Daddy. Sit down." James chuckled, easing onto the swing beside Sarah, his arm draping casually over her shoulders. Harper squeezed between them, reading her story again, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of the tale. Sarah leaned into James, feeling the steady warmth of him, the quiet promise he'd kept. He'd quit Alaska after the trial, taking a job at a local engineering firm. No more rigs, no more months away, just them here together. It hadn't been easy, those first months. Harper woke screaming some nights, her dreams tangled with falling boxes and angry voices. She'd flinch at loud noises, doors slamming, pots clanging, her small body tensing until Sarah or James held her close. Therapy helped, a kind woman with a soft voice who taught Harper to name her fears, to draw them out until they shrank. Sarah went too, unpacking her own guilt, the what-ifs that haunted her. What if I'd stayed? What if I'd listened? James carried his own scars. He'd missed too much, he said once, his voice rough with regret over late-night coffee. But he showed up now, every school event, every quiet evening, every time Harper needed him. They didn't talk about remarriage. The divorce lingered like an old bruise, too tender to press. But they built something else, a partnership, a family held together by choice, not paper. Inside, the house smelled of the lasagna James had baked, a recipe he'd learned just to make Harper laugh at his clumsy attempts. The living room was cluttered with her books and his tools, a messy, lived-in kind of peace. Sarah had cut back at the Chronicle, trading scoops for features, trading late nights for dinners at home. She still wrote, still chased truth. But Harper came first. The swing slowed, and Harper closed her notebook, nestling against Sarah. "Do you think Grandma and Aunt Kelly hate me?" she asked, her voice small, the question sudden. Sarah's breath caught. They hadn't spoken of Diane and Kelly in months, not since the letters stopped angry scrawls from prison blaming Sarah for everything. She glanced at James, who nodded slightly, giving her the lead. "No, Harp," she said, choosing her words carefully. "They don't hate you. They were mad at me, at themselves, and they took it out on you. That was wrong. But it's not your fault. Harper nodded, her brow furrowing. Ethan came by last week. He said sorry again. I told him it's okay. Sarah smiled, a pang of pride mixing with the ache. Ethan lived with his dad now, a quiet man who'd stepped up after Kelly's sentencing. He brought Ethan over sometimes, brief visits where the kids played in the yard, rebuilding something lost. Harper forgave easily, too easily maybe, but Sarah saw strength in it, a grace she wasn't sure she could muster. James ruffled Harper's hair. You're tougher than all of us, kiddo. You know that? She giggled, the sound light and free, and Sarah felt the last knot in her chest loosen. The sun sank below the horizon, the sky deepening to violet, and they sat there, the three of them, rocking in silence. A year ago, Sarah had stood in a hospital, her world shattered, vowing to make it right. Now she looked at Harper's braid, James's steady hand, the home they'd carved out of the wreckage, and knew they had. Time for dinner, James said, standing with a groan. Lasagna's calling. Harper raced inside, her laughter trailing behind. Sarah lingered, catching James's hand. We did it, she said, her voice thick. She's safe. We're safe. He squeezed her hand, his eyes soft. Yeah, and we're not letting go. They stepped inside, the door closing behind them, shutting out the past. Harper's voice floated from the kitchen, reading another line from her story. Family isn't the dark forest, it's the lantern that brings you home. Sarah smiled, tears pricking her eyes. They'd found their light, and it burned bright.